All right, you guys, we are back and we have for you guys Lyla Harrod. Did I see your last name right?
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lyla. We are excited.
I'm stoked to be here.
This is going to be a fun episode. We're going to learn lots of nuggets. So, our listeners already heard your kind of bio intro. So, as the listeners know, we are going to dive straight into your two truths and a lie. So, why don't you go ahead and break those down for us?
Sure. Okay. So I was all mine have to do with when I was younger, like when I was a kid. So here they are. All
All
right.
right.
First, I was afraid of swimming in public pools because I thought that there were sharks in there.
Okay.
Um, the second one is in middle school, I broke into the cafeteria and they caught me eating a case of the chocolate chip mini muffins. Um,
Okay.
Uh, and the third one is that growing up, I always desperately wanted to be in a boy band, specifically in sync. I like really thought I would fit in, you know?
Awesome. Okay. I like all of those. Those are fantastic. Um, okay. What do you think, Amanda? I feel like I wanted to be in a boy band too when I was younger, so I could totally see that being a feasible one. Swimming, I could see a little bit of the swimming pool thing, like being scared of sharks in there. I kind of feel like you didn't break into the cafeteria, or maybe you did and you were eating mini muffins. Maybe it was something else. What do you think, Amanda?
I feel like I love the cafeteria story, especially to become such a prolific through hiker, like the mini muffin lifestyle.
Yeah.
I really want that to be true. Um, I'm gonna go with the pool.
Okay. Okay. Well, don't tell us the answer, Lila. We will wait until the end of the episode to see if you really thought there were sharks in the pool or if you wanted to be in a boy band and all that stuff. Awesome. So today we're going to talk a lot about, goodness, lots of hiking, right? But first, I'd love to learn a little bit more. What got you interested and inspired to start taking on these long through hikes?
Yeah. So I've been a hiker like throughout my adult life. It wasn't a big part of my childhood,
Mhm.
but I've been a hiker. I got into backpacking when I moved out to Seattle in my early 20s. I had a friend who took me out on some overnights out in the Cascades and the Olympics, that got me sort of like maybe fall in love with it. When I moved back to the East Coast, a couple years later, I started getting up into the whites and really fell in love with the area up there.
Awesome.
But I was in active addiction through the vast
Mm.
majority of my 20s.
Mhm.
I've been sober a little over 7 years, and
Wow.
so that means that my 20s were characterized by time in bars, time drinking. Like it's
Yeah.
literally you don't think about the actual time that it takes up
Hmm.
to be in
Yeah.
active addiction. It eats up your life in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so one of the unfortunate side effects of that is that it limits the amount of time that you can spend in the outdoors away from your source of alcohol, whatever that is,
Hmm.
and or drugs or whatever it is.
Hmm.
So, you could see me out for like an overnight maybe, or maybe 2 nights, but really after that, I didn't really have any interest in staying out there anymore.
Mm.
Um, so it was like sort of like literal like sort of like handcuffs that were on me that kept me from sort of like pressing forward and stepping into this thing that I really, really liked and I wanted to go deeper into, but I was sort of chained in that way.
Oh,
So
wow.
then when I got sober, I got sober and then I started my gender transition not too long after that, maybe like 9 months or so publicly.
Hmm.
And yeah, after the first couple years of being sober and getting more stable in my gender transition, I felt like I had sort of like it's like talk about a new lease on life, right? Like
Hmm.
stepping into your own authenticity, feeling healthier than you've ever been because you're not just constantly sick. Although I do have a
Yeah.
cold right now, but that's
Oh.
separate. I'm not hungover, and
Yeah.
that's the real prize. So yeah, so getting to lean into that and be
Hmm.
in the best, position mentally and physically in my life to actually take on a huge challenge like that. I'd always been aware of the Appalachian Trail and I'd never had the capacity or resources to do it. And once I got
Wow.
sober and had begun my gender transition, that was something that all of a sudden came into my view as an actual
Yeah.
possibility. And
Awesome.
yeah, once I got on the Appalachian Trail, I spent about like I was maybe like 6 weeks into my AT through hike, and I was like, I love this, and
Mhm.
I want to keep on doing it. And here we
Yeah.
are, like 4 years later, still going strong.
That's awesome. Wow. What a journey. So when you did your first trail, Appalachian Trail, and I'll
Mm.
probably call it AT for our listeners moving forward. What was nutrition like? What was your thought around nutrition or fueling, really, just like for that first big hike?
I mean, I think I came in with like a sort of generalized backpacker's knowledge
Yeah.
of nutrition, just sort of reading what's on subreddits and everything.
Hmm.
I was doing like I had a stove and I was using dehydrated meals, things like
Yep.
that in the very beginning. But pretty quickly on, I realized that it's not cost effective,
Hmm.
and you don't really get a ton of great nutrition out of a lot of
Yeah.
freeze-dried meals either.
Yeah.
So you're basically eating junk food anyway. So you might as well just get like the dollar store mac and cheese or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and thus began my slow descent
Yeah.
into into madness.
Yeah.
And I will also say, as part of getting sober, something that I found was I didn't really have like a penchant for sweets and treats and
Mm.
everything. But once I got sober, oh my God, I like
Yeah.
was obsessed. I was obsessed. So on trail, my diet and off trail, my diet has
Mhm.
always reflected that.
We've had friends like that too, where when they go sober, yeah, the sugar becomes the next kind of like thing that helps in a sense. But yeah, I've certainly heard that before with our like friends and family that have dealt with sobriety and stuff like that.
It's so
So
real. Yeah.
yeah, and so you mentioned dollar store mac and cheese. What were some of your other go-tos?
On the AT, I stopped carrying a stove in maybe Pennsylvania, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So like roughly halfway. And then I haven't carried a stove since that on any of my
Wow.
through hikes. So I
Yeah.
switched over that trail to what they call dry goods,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that you're only eating stuff that's like, a bar or something that doesn't require water to reheat,
Mm-hmm.
or to, rehydrate. So I was just totally eating like dollar store, granola bars and nuts and
Mm-hmm.
very, very simple tuna, chicken, like just things that
Yeah.
could be eaten right away.
Mm-hmm.
After that, every through hike after that, I have done some form of cold soaking.
Yeah.
Um, as my primary source of like meals, I would
Mm-hmm.
say, like cold soaking like oatmeal with nuts and fruit in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then at night I'll do some sort of big meal. What like I like to rehydrate. Like rice,
Mm-hmm.
and then just put in packets of like, the chicken or bacon bits, all sorts of gross stuff. Velveeta cheese. Yeah, you didn't think you're gonna hear Velveeta cheese come
Yeah.
up on your nutrition podcast, but
Yeah.
strap in.
Calorie resource. I remember certainly
Yes.
they were not doing through hiking, but back in the day, like backpacking, my parents and grandparents backpacking, they would bring like sticks of salami because it was just such a dense calorie source. They were not doing thousands of miles, mind you, but yeah, certainly a resource for energy. So
Yeah.
with those like the cold soaking, I'm very familiar with. We had Sunny Strower on our podcast a couple
Yeah,
times,
I
and
saw that.
she
Yeah.
did attempted the AZT, and then we got our nutrition really dialed with a lot of cold soaking stuff. But yeah, it was a lot of like water, well, how do I say it? It was a lot of like weight ratio stuff. With the through hikes that you were doing, were you able to stop and restock goods, or were you starting like fully loaded with all your nutrition at the start of the trail?
Yeah, calorie to weight ratio and calorie to macro ratio and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Like that is stuff that I do like have a good sense of, and I make choices
Yeah.
based on that. I'm generally resupplying on my trips,
Hmm.
and a lot of the hikes that I'm doing, I don't necessarily know where I'm gonna be and when.
Right.
There's no guarantee that I'll ever stop in any one individual town unless it's been 200 miles and that's the only thing in any direction,
Yeah.
right? Like things
Wow.
happen out on trail, especially when you're like creating your own routes, right? Like you have a
Yeah.
lot of flexibility and things, changes need to be made. So I wasn't really sending myself resupply boxes ahead,
Hmm.
but that does mean that you are like getting most of your nutrition from gas stations and
Yeah.
dollar stores.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, talking about things like happen on the trail, like what kind of things did you run into issue wise, or were they ever nutrition or hydration related?
Yeah, well, I mean, I had well, I guess it's funny now, story come out of when I was hiking in northern Arizona. I was on a route called the Mogollon Rim Trail. And there's this, well, I don't want to like, yeah, it's not this place's fault. There was this tiny little like country store that's in a hunting community
Oh, okay. Yeah.
where they hadn't there's only one store and they hadn't really gotten any shipment for this coming season. They were only left sorry, that this last year, so like
Yeah.
all they had left was what was left over from the prior season. So there
Mm.
was very little in the way of like protein and fat
Hmm.
resources. And I usually like to do some kind of like I said, I'll make wraps out of tortillas or rice dishes, but I do like to have some kind of like protein fat kind of thing. So the
Hmm.
only thing that I could find in this tiny little shop was a packet of refrigerated Nathan's hot dogs. Um, and it sounds fine, right? You know, hot dogs, whatever. It's like kind of
Yeah.
gross, but like, and I don't have a stove, so I was eating these hot dogs. I had like 2 hot dogs per wrap for 2 meals, so I had 4 like raw hot dogs
Oh my
in one day for lunch and dinner. And then I
Yeah.
woke up at 1:30 that morning, and I just barely got my head out of the tent and started puking, and
Oh.
like literally, I mean, thank God there was a trail only a couple miles away, but I spent the
Hmm.
next 24 hours with my head, like in a toilet or in the
Oh.
ground puking.
Yeah.
And
Oh
but
man.
what was I supposed to do? Like
Yeah.
you're running on a clock at that point when you're not putting fat and protein back into your body.
Right, right. So you don't bring a stove, but do you bring a way to make fire at all?
No,
Okay.
no, no. Yeah, it
Wow.
would just be like too much time a lot of
Yeah.
times, or yeah, not super necessary.
Wow. How much are you sleeping when outside of when you're waking up to like with the hot dog situation, but like on a normal through hike, what do you plan for sleep? Are you trying to get 8 hours? You getting 3 hours? Like, what does that look like?
Honestly, I sleep better on trail than I do anywhere else
I
on the
bet.
planet for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's nothing like hiking 35 miles in a day to really make
Yeah.
sure you get quality sleep. But I'm also like, I mean, my body tends to sync up with the sunrise and
Yeah.
sunset. I do stay up after sunset, and
Hmm.
I like listen to a podcast, watch a
Yeah.
show. If I have something
Hmm.
downloaded, maybe I'll do that.
Hmm.
Um, but generally, I like to wake up when the sun gets up and start walking.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. That's great. So it sounds like you are getting like hopefully a good amount of sleep depending on the time of year you're doing these things. And would you
Yeah.
wake up like with your body feeling recovered or are you feeling a little stiff to get going or
Yeah, I mean, like over any amount of time, your body wears down. So over these I mean, this is the most recent route I did was 3,000 miles through some
hmm
really rugged terrain, not traditional trail like a lot of
hmm
people think of when they think of through hiking. So the physical exertion level and the mental exertion level was a lot higher than what people generally think of. So yeah, it does weigh on your body over time. Thankfully, I mean, like I feel like my like tendons and all the things that need to stay really, really strong have just been
hmm
built up just from, logging,
Yeah.
13,000 miles of the last few years. And that really
Wow.
does, that is a huge advantage. So like all you have to do is make sure you're replenishing your muscles. And
Hmm
I feel like I'm pretty capable with that at this point.
Wow, that's great. So you had mentioned earlier that you're kind of like making your own route. Is that with the Appalachian Trail or the recent Crest to Divide?
Yeah, the divide to crest. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So
So that's something that I made up. That's not something that existed before I did
gotcha.
it. It was just a concept that I had that I
Yeah. I like it. I like
wanted
it.
to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So for our listeners that maybe don't know what that is, can you kind of break that down? Where does it start? Where does it end? What's the distance? What kind of terrain are we crossing? That kind of stuff.
For sure, yeah. So the Divide to Crest route runs from the southern terminus of the Continental Divide at the Mexican border to the northern terminus of the Pacific Crest, which is at the Canadian border. So rather than, I mean, people are, familiar with the through hikes that go straight up the country, the Continental Divide Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail. While it does utilize small pieces or like chunks of those trails, I was actually cutting sort of diagonally to connect the two using some pre-existing routes that were already there.
Hmm
Some hikes that I've already been on, like the
hmm
Arizona Trail, actually, like the one that Sunny was just doing. Like
hmm
I used part of that, and then also some sort of more like backcountry routes that aren't, established trails necessarily, but other
Wow.
humans have walked. And
Yeah.
then I was creating some of my own routes as well.
Wow.
Along the way. So it's a lot of it was desert is the long and short of it. The vast majority of my last summer was
Wow.
spent in like open desert and like high mountain ranges like in Nevada.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're making that crossover from so you said you started southern and went north.
Yes, yep.
So when you're crossing over from the Continental Divide to the PCT, are you going over the Sierras or what? Like that's
So
isn't
it
there a big
goes
mountain
like
range?
so like the basic walkthrough, right, is that it starts, at the Mexican border,
Hmm.
heads sort of northwest across New Mexico, and then
Mm-hmm.
cuts west across Arizona. Once I got
Okay.
to Sedona, I headed north up to Flagstaff.
Mm.
From Flagstaff, I went all the way following the Arizona Trail up
Okay.
to the Utah border. At
Hmm.
which point, sorry, I went to the Grand Canyon, at
Oh,
which point
okay.
I took
Yeah.
something called the Hayduke route. I took that west to Utah and
Wow.
then hiked across Utah to get to Nevada. And I basically did like sort of like a north to south kind of
Yeah.
thing across Nevada and then headed west across Oregon until I met the Pacific Crest.
Wow. Gosh. And so, I mean, was there ever any like situations where you're like, man, I'm way off trail or I went the wrong way or I'm lost? Like, is there any of that crossing your mind ever?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing that, kind of saves your ego, right, is like when no one's ever done it before, you're never off trail. You're
Yeah.
always exactly where you're supposed to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You're making your own
Um,
route.
yeah, yeah, but for sure, I mean, yeah, there's times where like if there's like a storm coming in and you're,
Mm,
up high on a ridge, like in
mm,
Nevada or something, that happened
yeah.
a few times. But I mean, those are situations I've been in before. It's
Mhm.
mostly just sort of like stay focused and hustle to safety. I
Yeah.
didn't have any like crazy life-threatening things this time
Mhm.
around. And I think that that's like a a benefit of having the experience that I have is that I know how to take care of myself out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely want to talk, like, eventually get to talking about like the mental willpower for things like this, these colossal through hikes. But I do want to jump back a little bit to the nutrition side of things, kind of talking about a little bit of the lead up. So before you're about to head off day one of your through hike, what does your nutrition look like in the days leading up? Are you trying to get in extra calories because you know you might be under on the trail, or how do you structure that?
Yeah, so I think like I don't even really when you're talking about efforts this long, like any like lead up or anything isn't super
Right.
relevant, right? Like the initial days like leading up to it aren't going to matter because it's such a long effort. And it's
Yeah.
not like I was trying to like, do this in 50 days or something like
Right.
that. This specific one was not a speed effort. It was just
Hmm.
a can I create this route?
Yeah.
So that provides a lot more flexibility. But I think how I'll answer though is to say that in the off season, just in general, like after my through hikes, when I get home, I'm living in New Hampshire, and I spend a lot of time hiking up in the mountains here. But my nutrition, like I, I expect that I will like put on some weight when I'm not through hiking. So you're saying sort of
Mm.
like, do these like calorie I'm not like carbo
Surplus.
loading 2 days before,
Hmm.
but I expect that I'm not going to be at my through hiking weight the whole year.
Right.
And I think it's good to put on a little bit of extra fat content so that when I am out there, because I know I run at a pretty steep calorie deficit over time
Yeah. Yeah.
on these long efforts that I don't mind having a couple extra pounds to use out there. It's like people on like the show Alone and stuff like
Oh,
that. They kind of like
yes.
bulk up, but I'm not gonna
Yeah.
say I'm like, literally trying to like put on pounds like a, wrestler or something like
Yeah.
that. But I just don't, I try to keep it like pretty flexible.
Right. Yeah. Do you have you well, jumping back a little bit, talking about the duration of these things, how long did the divide to crest take you?
So it was 3,000 miles or so, and it
Mhm.
took me 4 months.
Wow. And when you are going through that, and like you're saying, just trying to see if you could make a route and complete it, are you going off of like how your body feels and like taking a rest day every now and again? Or how do you structure that into a 4 month journey?
Totally. That it's very much by feel. And like, I mean, it's super cool to talk to you and, you know, like people who like are like actually know what they're talking about and are experts and everything, because so much of my decision making is based on the experience of being in my body and what
Yeah.
and knowing the cues that my body's giving me to know
Mhm.
what I should be putting in it. And then the real skill is knowing how to get those things from a Dollar General or from a gas station, right? And still be able to keep your body moving and keep
Yeah.
from getting from getting injured.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The trial and error, and like the hot dog situation, right? The
The
trial and
hot
error.
dog situation,
Yeah.
yes.
So it sounds like from a nutrition lens and what you're consuming on the trail, probably getting a lot of salt from your foods that you're choosing. Are you also bringing in any additional electrolytes like into your fluids, or are you just getting, re getting plain water from streams and rivers and stuff? Or
Definitely a lot of salt from the diet, that's
yeah.
for sure. Because of the nature of the through hike that I was doing this past year, where I mean, you know, I walked across Nevada and Eastern Oregon in like June, July, August. You know what I mean? Like I didn't pick the right quote unquote right time to hike through the
Mhm.
Oregon Desert. I was in the Oregon Desert in July, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Wow.
nobody would recommend that. So that I mean that just means that I have to be extra cognizant of my of my electrolyte intake,
Hmm.
not only with like my like junky diet or whatever, but I carry electrolytes.
Yeah.
And I mean I can feel when my body is even a little bit low on electrolytes at this point.
Yeah.
It's usually, I mean, as you know, it's a little bit easier to top off on things like electrolytes than it is to fall into a deficit and recover from that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The hydration. Gosh, what did I saw this study that was really interesting. They were talking about like if you drive yourself into to a dehydration hole, like proper full rehydration can take several hours to like days to completely actually like rehydrate. It's really interesting to think about. Like if you even just within a given day of hiking, if you I don't know, don't have water available or or you get sick and you're losing fluids from your body via vomiting or those kind of things, like yeah, you can dive yourself, dig yourself into a hole that takes a little bit to come back from.
Yes, yeah, actually that reminds me of like of a story, right? Because it's not in the case of this hike where it was like hard desert, the electrolytes and keeping yourself hydrated are a form of keeping yourself safe from things like heat exhaustion and heat
Yeah.
stroke, right? So with those being the true like danger to my life and on that through hike, I was really cognizant of managing that stuff. So there were times where I was sort of choosing like, I mean, I had to drink this really disgusting water that was definitely, I mean, it was pee. Okay. It was pee. It was pee. It tasted like ammonia. It was so disgusting.
Whoa.
It was the grossest thing I've ever done. But
Yeah.
I had to get it out of this nasty puddle.
Oh
Right. And
gosh.
it was this. I either drink this disgusting pea water
Yeah.
or I try to hike 15 miles through the desert in July and for a like maybe you have water on the other side,
Oh
right?
no.
And
Yeah.
so like at that point, I'm not just thinking about like if you were just making that choice for like a day hike or for a
Yeah.
run that you're going on, right? Like you are playing on a much different level because at that time, like I have to decide, is this going to cause me to get, go into heat
Hmm.
exhaustion? Right. And then am I going to be able to recover once I get there? Because there's very little shade to no shade. Sometimes you would see
Hmm.
shade only once or twice a day.
Yeah.
So like you're choosing to really, really risk not only dehydration, but heat exhaustion and then being stuck out there with no way to
Yeah.
recover from that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Speaking of that, like you have a water filter, right? Or a water, some sort of water.
Oh my God, thank God. Yeah, yes.
Good.
Sawyer squeeze. That's right.
Okay. Good. Good. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I think we've heard some crazy stories. Like, yeah, it's just some gnarly, like really poor water quality situations that, yeah, you can run into when you're out there because you don't have any other options. Do you ever experience like muscle cramping or anything like that when you're out doing your through hikes?
It definitely happens. Yeah, sometimes. I mean, that would be, I think it's inevitable that it will happen over the course of a long enough through hike like that you're gonna run into that. I mean, I try to
Hmm.
keep myself out of that as much as possible, and
Yeah.
definitely, in town, I'm getting bananas and things like that pickles, whatever I can to keep my potassium levels okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, like, yeah, if I'm running into cramping, that's a big problem.
Yeah, yeah. That can certainly, like you're saying, listening to your body and be quite painful. How much does your pack usually weigh when you like start out?
Yeah, so this time, God, I think I was around like 12 or 13 pounds when I started.
Really? Does that include water or no?
No, not including water, not including
Okay.
water. But that was with like my cold weather gear too.
Okay.
So that was like, yeah, because I knew that, I mean, I had to
Wow.
go through what they called the Gila National Forest, had a ton of snow, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I was very much dealing with that. And it's cold early on.
Yeah.
So, but then I started dropping that stuff. I ended up around like 10 pounds or so.
hmm
But you know, then you have like, it's super important on a trail like that to keep your base weight low, because when, you know, in this case, I was creating a route where there is no guarantee. There's no like
hmm
far out, you know, the app to tell you when the next water is or something. There's no other people's reports about where things are. So you need to prepare for the
Yeah.
worst, while still staying light enough to be able to make the miles that you need to make to get
hmm
to from one point to another. So
Wow.
there was one point on the trail heading into Wells, Nevada, where I did a 55-mile water carry. Um,
Wow.
and I did that with 10 liters of water, and I did run out by the end, but it was like
Wow.
1 in the morning at that point. So
Yeah.
so
Oh
thankfully it
my.
wasn't as hot anymore in the dark under
Yeah.
the stars.
Wow. Wow. So, gosh, that's wild. So, okay, man, so many questions. So would you said 10 liters?
Yeah, 10 liters. Yep.
How much does 10 liters weigh? Is it like, what is it? It's like 8 pounds, 8 pounds a gallon or something like that?
It's like a gallon. I don't know how much it is a gallon. I was saying it's like two and change per liter or something like
Okay.
that.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
it was definitely at least 20 to 25 pounds of water, I would say.
Wow.
Plus I had a couple of days of food left at that point. Thankfully I had started, that was that section that I did was a 210, 220 mile section in total.
hmm
So I was already carrying, I carried 5 days of food, and I did the
Yeah.
210 or whatever in 4 days.
Wow. That is wild. That's amazing. So how often are you eating when you're on the trail? You talked about kind of doing some dinner later, cold soaking some stuff in the morning. You
hmm
snacking throughout the trail? Are you stopping for like a full like lunch? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it looks different on every trail depending on what the weather and the
Mm.
situation is. But in this one, like, you know, I'll speak again to the desert, right? I was usually doing cold soaking my oatmeal if I had enough water to justify it.
hmm
And I would keep like a bar or two in my pockets
hmm
for like the early morning sort of walking second breakfast and drinking my
hmm
caffeine.
hmm
And then yeah, like basically by like 1 to 2, I would maybe stop for an actual lunch, make a wrap or
hmm
something like that. If I found shade that was like that would justify a break, I would do that. Because at
hmm
that point, you're talking about the heat of the day, where it's you it, you can hike through the heat of the day. It could be 100 degrees and completely exposed in the sun. You
Yeah.
can do it. I have. If you know that you have enough water to do that, you can. But
hmm
like, I think of it as like resource management at that point. Like,
hmm
you're burning through so much water, you're burning through so many electrolytes just to keep yourself from going into heat exhaustion.
Yeah.
That like, resource management is everything for me. So that like, it doesn't generally justify it. I would rather hike into the night. It's really
hmm
nice to hike in the desert at night. It's
Yeah.
gorgeous. You get to see the
Yeah.
Milky Way. It's incredible.
That's awesome. Wow, that is amazing. So with these through hikes, have you like talking about overall like body, are you running into any, I don't know, like knee pain issues? Are we seeing like a big change in like your composition when you get off the trail? Like what is that like after 4 months out there?
Yeah, I mean, body comp for sure changes. My weight stays around the same.
Wow, that's
Um,
great.
yeah, and it's just body comp that changes for me.
hmm
Like I get a lot more muscle.
hmm
But yeah, I don't tend to lose weight. super often. I mean, it happens a little bit, but not the drastic,
Yeah.
when you see people come off trail and they look gaunt. That's not
Yeah.
my experience.
Yeah.
I try to maintain my weight.
That's
I
great.
know the value of food and how it makes me able to do the things that I need to do. So,
Yeah.
um, and then yeah, like I said, off trail, I tend to put on a few pounds,
Mhm.
and my body comp changes to more fat. But yeah, I see that as sort of my natural sort of like cycle of my body.
Yeah. No, that I mean that says a lot too from like a nutrition lens for your body throughout the trail, right? If we're consistently in this like big caloric deficit that's causing a net weight loss at the end, I mean, your body's going to start pulling resources from things like tendon and ligaments and from your bone and from your muscle. And yeah, so the fact that you're able to like maintain that and bring in enough energy basically to maintain that weight balance and sounds like a good amount of you're like nailing protein. It sounds like if we're able to see like a composition change and put on lean mass or decrease body fat, like I mean that's awesome. Sounds like you're doing
Yeah,
it.
I was actually thinking about like, but before coming on the podcast, I was like, well, like, I mean, I was thinking about protein in general, right? Because
Yeah.
protein is actually it can be on the harder end to come by from like dollar store things from dollar stores in large quantities.
Yeah.
Um, or at least that's not like, I mean, if you go to a gas station, you can get a protein bar, but it might be $4 or something
Mm-hmm.
crazy, where like
Hmm.
I do not have the money for that.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say like I don't have my focus on protein is more based on the type of hiking that I'm doing in that moment. If I'm doing
Hmm.
like flat, if I know I'm gonna have like a road walk or something like that, I'm
Hmm.
mostly just gonna need carbs and fat, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't tend to need as much like recovery protein like at the end of the
Hmm.
day.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, when I'm like up in the mountains, scrambling, hands and knees, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
like for sure, it might be like a 2 packet of chicken kind of night or whatever. Oh, actually, I was like, I knew I wanted to share this with y'all too. So this is like, I don't hear people talking about this for through hikers very often, and definitely not outside of the through hiking, like, endurance community. But like, okay, so I'm going to share with you what I believe to be a like magic through hiking food that for the price to calorie to weight to macros ratio, I think is like one of the most helpful things possible.
I'm excited.
And you might be grossed out. It's pork rinds, like
Oh
chicharrones.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They are literally a like superfood. If you look at the
Right.
macro to weight ratio of those,
Mm-hmm.
eating a packet of pork rinds, it weighs like 2 to 3 ounces, and it's
Right.
got 50 grams of protein in it, and
Yeah.
it's got salt and flavor. So
Yep.
like, I would always pack out a dollar store thing of like pork rinds, like
Yeah.
chicharrones. I crush them up. I
Yep.
get the chili lime ones, and if
Mm.
you put chicharrones, like chili lime chicharrones on anything, now it tastes like bacon, lime, and chili, right? Like it
That
makes
is actually a
everything
great
better.
point. Yeah.
And it's very affordable. So
Yeah.
yeah, tell your
That
friends, pork
that
rinds.
is a good point you bring up. Yeah, because they are incredibly light. And then yeah, there's loaded with salt, fats, and proteins. There is a good amount of protein in there. And
Tons
yeah,
of
it's a
way
complete
more than you
protein.
think. Way
Yeah.
more than you think.
Yeah. Wow. That's a good, yeah, good. I don't know if it's an issue for some people, but the one thing I think of is like they are like take up a bit of volume, but like you're saying, like smash them down and
I crushed them down. Yeah.
yeah, genius. I love it. That's a good one. Okay. So that's a magic trick for our through hikers. What's your go-to? Because you've been called, or some people, do you call yourself Sugar or do other people call you Sugar?
Yeah, that's my trail name. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe tell us how you got that trail name.
Because I eat like shit. Wait, I don't know if I can swear on here, but
It's okay.
yeah. I mean, that's literally why I thought it was so fun. It was so like interesting to be asked by y'all, and why I was
Yeah.
so stoked to go on this podcast is because I am literally known for not knowing about this stuff, or not,
Yeah.
like, or
Yeah.
not being like a super healthy eater or anything. But yeah, I mean, I think that I for sure, like, I eat a lot of like gummy candy, things like
Mhm.
that. Like, those are things, oh God. N- Nothing I'm saying right now is medical advice. And of course, everyone knows that. But
Yeah.
I've done this thing, and I don't think I've ever talked about this one publicly either. But this is like, So I eat tons of like sour gummy candy.
Yeah.
I have done this thing when if I get dehydrated enough, if I'm totally, it happens. It's
Mhm.
unfortunate no matter how I think I'm a really good at resource management, but sometimes it happens that things go wrong and you end up
Yeah.
having to hike at least a bit without water or appropriate
Mhm.
resource. So sometimes all I've had left is like, a packet of the extreme Sour Patch Kids,
Mm.
and I will literally just start eating them just to keep my mouth like
Oh,
moist,
yeah.
like from a comfort standpoint.
Yeah.
And you get the little sugar boost or whatever to keep your
Mhm.
like just to keep pushing through what is probably a horrible situation if you're like
No,
totally out of
that's
water
right.
walking through the desert, like
Yeah.
not a good feeling. But the
Yeah.
sugar and the like having your having some moisture in your mouth or whatever is great. My dentist hates
Oh
that for me.
no. Yeah. You're not alone though talking about the dentist thing. I've had a lot of cyclists because I mean whether it's even if it's like sugary gels and it doesn't have to be sour gummy candy, but it's all these sports nutrition products are very high sugar because of how they can quickly absorb and go to the working muscle tissue and be a fuel source very rapidly. But yeah, they get all in your teeth. And yeah, I have actually had a few clients where they have prescription toothpaste that they brush their teeth with before a race and then do their race with all the sugar stuff and then use the prescription toothpaste again after the race because their
Why
dentist is
didn't I think of
like,
that?
yeah.
No,
Um,
so it is the sugar, but when you don't have water to rinse your mouth out with, like I usually rinse my mouth out after eating sour gummy candy. You're also
yeah,
leaving a ton of citric acid on your teeth. So,
yeah,
and if you don't have water, what ends up happening is my teeth hurt the next day, right? Like I'll end up with like
yeah,
sort of like an abrasion situation.
right.
So that's why I'm saying it's terrible advice, what I just said. It is not something you should do. I'm just telling you what I did do because
Yeah.
that's what I did.
Yes, yeah. Well, and like I told you before we hit record, we love having people on like yourself because we want to know what people are doing in the real world and what is working for them or not working for them. And then we like to have the
Yeah.
researcher side of the lab setting so we can our listeners can tie those two worlds together.
Yeah. Would love to hear a scientist take on what I'm saying right now.
Yeah. Well, I will also I'll back and say that I have had probably hundreds of endurance like cyclists and runners in the exact same boat where like the sports nutrition products and gels are incredibly expensive. But you can buy a pack of like trolley gummy worms or like you're saying Sour Patch Kids and you can fuel your training session on a with almost identical ingredients at the end of the day. But you're not paying that cost. So it is kind of yeah, a nicely packaged, expensive um, piece of sugar in a sports nutrition product. So at the end of the day, so if you can find that stuff that works for you, that's a good, I think you got to go with it. So
Yeah.
that's great. So, okay, jumping to a little bit of like oh gosh, I want to dive into the mental stuff with you too, but maybe let's do the mental stuff because I want to talk about what happens when you're off the trail, but let's talk about mental stuff too. So when you're out there doing these hikes, you mentioned like was it 6 weeks into your first hike, you like fell in love and wanted to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
what, how do you navigate or do you ever get to points where you're like, man, like I would love to sleep in my own bed or have like that home cooked meal or like my body's really hurting. Like, are you ever running into those things and like how do you mentally get past those and keep going?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the literal answer is that if you were out in the middle of nowhere, there is no like, evacuate, eject button to just pop you home, and
Right.
the barrier to literally getting to that place that you're craving for is essentially insurmountable in that moment. So I think
Hmm.
you are kind of like stuck in it if you were, to use that type of phrase, but like I don't feel stuck in it.
Yeah.
That's not how I feel about it. I mean,
Yeah.
I love it. I look forward to my time alone in the
Hmm.
outdoors.
Hmm.
I spent what amounted to about 1,400 miles without seeing another hiker this year. Um,
Wow.
yeah, only seeing people on trail. Like, I had seen I had hiked with a couple people who were on the Hayduke in Utah, and then
Hmm.
I didn't see anyone through another hiker through the state of Nevada, or through most of Oregon until I got to the Pacific Crest Trail,
Wow.
like in Western Oregon. So,
Wow.
so I spend a
That's
lot of time
wild.
by myself, but that's like, like
Yeah.
I, I crave that. And, I don't know. I think people would perceive that I'm like an extrovert, but I also think that, I actually recharge when I'm alone in the outdoors. And like,
Yeah.
I also like, I use the term alone, but I very rarely feel like lonely on trail or even alone, right? Like
Yeah.
I go out there because of the feeling of like connection that I get with my
Hmm.
surroundings, with all the living things. So that's my
That's
little
awesome.
like hippie moment for you, but that is how
Yeah.
I feel, and
Yeah.
that's what makes it possible for me.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, there is certainly something to be said for getting out in nature, even if it's for a 30-minute walk or something, but to get that feeling of like away from all the other stressors of life and technology and yeah, reset. I think
Hmm.
anytime you can get that, I think that's important. Okay, so when you are coming off the trail, what's kind of the first thing you do? Like you've crossed the finish line in a sense. Are you going straight to take a nap? Are you going to get a burger somewhere? Like what's happening?
I mean, I think it's been different for me on a year-to-year basis.
Hmm.
I'd say that sometimes I'm just going to whatever like the next trail is, whatever the next
Hmm.
adventure is.
Yeah.
Like after finishing the CDT, I was finishing sort of, I kind of put myself on a timeline so that I could go and make an FKT attempt on the long trail.
Mm.
And I wanted to use not only the current physical fitness that I had, but also the daylight window.
Yeah.
Um, that I had. So sometimes it's just jumping right into the thing and trying to use that sort of like superpower that you gain from all your time out on trail, to put it towards whatever my next project is. But my heart wants to come and spend time up here in New Hampshire with my friends. And
Yeah.
yeah, like I usually come back. I like to come back to the Notch Hostel up here in North Woodstock. It's an Appalachian Trail hostel, owned by
Cool.
my friend, and that's like my community up here.
Nice.
So I like to be around those people.
Yeah, that's great. Do you feel like your body at all, like, do you feel like in a really fit place, or do you feel like your body needs some rest after something like that?
Oh God, like both, I guess. You could it, it could be that you are in the best shape of your life, but
Hmm.
that you cannot hike as nearly as fast as you want to, or that
Yeah.
once you're I think that there's something to be said for like once you get through these long journeys, right?
Hmm.
um your body knows that, and your body can feel that, and your body
Hmm.
starts to like relax, and maybe will not, it's just like get on strike for a little bit, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
not going to turn around and automatically keep performing at that same level, because my body knows that we don't need to right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I try to
Yeah.
like I try to listen to it. I mean, I just like always want to get back out there, but yeah, I definitely like to take, I think I can do about a week of just sort of like vegging and hanging with
Yeah.
my friends before I'm like,
Embrace that.
I gotta get back out there. And that's a week after spending 4 months of like working my butt
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
So usually it's much shorter for shorter
Yeah.
for shorter trips.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, that is a good listening to your body is so important, right? And you've probably heard of like the term overtraining, or the other kind of
Hmm.
like term is overreaching before you hit overtraining. And a lot of that like talks about, making sure like if you do take some time off, do you eventually get to a point where you are feeling motivated and excited to get back out there after you've had a break? If you're not, then we might be in a place of overtraining, but it sounds like your body's recovering really well. And I think a lot of that probably has to do with like keeping enough energy coming in. Like you're saying, your weight's able to maintain throughout that whole journey, which is really incredible.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm excited I mean, what's next for you?
Well, I have a spoiler, I'm not gonna say what I'm doing next
Okay.
specifically right now, because
Okay.
I'm not at a point where that makes sense for me.
Okay.
But I do have something big planned for the year. I have big
Fun.
plans, and I'm gonna be hiking a lot, and I'm gonna be
Yeah.
hiking fast, and
Awesome.
I'm gonna be hiking something that people are all aware of.
Oh,
So
cool. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
We'll keep our eyes peeled for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
ask me in a couple months. Yeah.
Okay. And our listeners too can follow you on your Instagram, right? And maybe there'll be some posts about that when that time comes.
For sure, yeah. That's my Instagram is at Seltzer Skelter. Seltzer like the drink and Skelter like Helter Skelter.
Perfect. And we'll link that in the show notes for our listeners. Okay, I want to go back to your two truths and a lie, so I can make sure we get all this in before we run out of time here. So we had that you were afraid of swimming in public pools because you thought there were sharks in it. You broke into your middle school cafeteria to eat chocolate chip mini muffins, and that growing up you wanted to be in the boy band in sync. I thought the mini muffin cafeteria break-in was the lie. Amanda, I think. Oh no, what did you think, Amanda?
I, I went with the pool.
The pool. Okay. Which one was it, Lyla?
Kyla, you got it.
Yes. So did you break in
Mini
and eat
muffin.
something else or just no break in whatsoever?
No break in, but I
Okay.
was for sure eating a lot of chocolate chip mini muffins. I feel like middle schoolers don't really even eat real food half the
No.
time, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, I was like a chocolate mini muffin kid for sure.
That's awesome. Those sounds very good. It reminds me, I think my mom used to pick up like the Costco muffins. I don't know if you guys ever, and she would like buy that big
So
flat
good.
and she'd put them in the freezer and then like you'd pull them out and put them in the, oh gosh, they were, yeah, I like remember
They're
the smell of
unbelievable.
those. It's so
But
good.
Amanda, the pool thing, the shark thing. Okay, do you know at the excuse me, do you know at the bottom of the pool how they have the black the paint lines or whatever to mark the
Hmm.
lanes? And at
Yeah.
the end of the paint line, there's like a T sort of
Yep.
thing. If that doesn't look like a hammerhead shark to a 4-year-old trying to swim, I don't know what
That's so
does,
true.
okay?
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I can see that. That's funny. Oh, and one definitely wanted to be in a boy band. I get it. That what year were you born?
Justin Timberlake's hair, come on, man. He
Yeah,
was killing it with that, with the
yeah,
frosted tips and everything. I just thought they were so cool. And I was like, I cannot sing, but I
yeah,
fancied myself quite the vocalist, I
yeah,
imagine.
yeah. The boy bands and the girl bands were all the rage. Were you an 80s baby or an early 90s baby?
87. So yeah,
Okay.
I was like
Yep.
right in the like TRL years, you
Yep.
know.
Yeah. Yep. And MTV and all that. Yeah.
MTV, that's right.
I know it. I know all about it. That is fun. Okay, so we're not doing any spoilers of what's coming up for you, but we did have a couple questions. Let's see. This one says, how was your New York Marathon? Did you feel your through hiking experience translated from a fitness or endurance standpoint?
I did, and thank God, because like we're talking about like having the motivation to train and everything. Like I I wasn't feeling motivated. The truth is, I don't really like road running. Trail running,
Yeah.
cool. But
Yeah.
road running, especially where I live, is deeply boring because there's very few like roads that are safe enough to run on,
Mm,
like for long distances.
yeah.
I would always rather be hiking, so I always ended up just like my training runs were more like hiking up Mount Moosilauke and then running down, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
So
man.
I do think that it translated though. I mean, just like having the tendon strength and having
Yep.
the sort of like the baseline like muscles allowed me to finish. Like I feel like I got like 406 or something, just sort of like a standard
Nice.
like time for a marathon. I wasn't trying to win out there, but I was just happy to be able to do it and to raise funds for Point of Pride, which is a
Yeah.
nonprofit that supports gender affirming care for trans people around the country.
And is this the same as your mentor program? Because that was our next question. How does someone get involved in your mentoring program?
Yeah, so it's not the same. So that's a nonprofit. They operate out of Oregon.
Okay.
Trail QTs is the mentoring program that I started a couple of years ago. It's now me and two other queer folks who serve as the mentors for first-time queer and trans through hikers.
Cool.
So yeah, so if you want to get involved right now, we're not taking on new mentors at the time,
Hmm.
but we are going to be putting out our application for mentorship in the coming month or so.
Awesome.
So if you are a queer and trans person or trans person and you're working on planning your first through hike, I would say message me directly on Instagram or follow me and keep an eye out. Or also follow the Trail QTs account, which is just at Trail QTs.
Perfect. Awesome. We'll link those for our listeners as well. And then we have one last question. It says, how many miles per day were you doing on your Divide to Crest route?
Well, it depended. I mean, up to 55
Wow.
that day in Nevada.
Yeah.
But you know, there were some days like, yeah, along the Hayduke where I probably was doing low 20s or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say generally averaging in like the low to mid 30s was
Wow.
probably a pretty normal day for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it makes me think about like the whole like get 10,000 steps a day. It's like you're out there like 55 miles in a day. It's like that is pretty incredible. So
Yeah.
yeah, this has been so informative and amazing. And I want to be mindful of your time. But our listeners can find you on Instagram, and then we'll link the mentoring program, the nonprofit. Is there anywhere else they should follow or find you?
I guess that's probably it for now. I mean, I have a YouTube, but I don't really post on it like I should. But you know, I think it's Sugar Hikes is my YouTube. So
Perfect.
maybe I'll start posting on
There
that.
you
Probably.
go. Keep our eyes
Maybe.
peeled. Yeah.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for joining us, Lyla. This has been great.
Thanks so much for inviting me. This has been really great.